any kind of past feelings or emotions I had about it, whether it be depression, failure, resentment, and really look that in the face and be like, look, man, you cannot point the finger first. You're not a failure. You can bounce back from this. Like, look at what you did. Like, look at your accomplishments, but then also look at your failures.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mindset Podcast, hosted by Eric Nelson and brought to you by Wild Oak Capital. Eric is a real estate investor, business owner, and performance coach. Throughout this series, Eric explores the mindset behind why certain investors are so successful and how we can learn from their achievements and failures. Eric asks the tough questions around the habits, discipline, mindset, and more required to achieve the most ambitious goals. Thank you for being here and enjoy the show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Real Estate Mindset Podcast. This is the first ever bonus episode. I'm so jazzed. I mean, this is like a totally different format. We basically just spitball the whole way through. And I'm not going to ask kind of the standard questions. It's just like true bonus. And Kyle has such a cool story. So Kyle, thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You've got, quite the backstory. So I'll just let you start with that. I mean, can you give us kind of like your background, where you're from, what you were up to, and then what sort of led you to real estate? And there's a lot between there, so we'll dive in, but give us kind of like the 3-minute, background.
Sure. Well, I was born as a young baby. No, I'll keep it a little shorter. So I'm from Colorado, a little small town, Bayfield, near Durango. I've spent about the last 17 years in the electrical construction trades, multiple facets and industries, industrial, oil and gas, commercial and residential, and different levels, starting from the trenches up through middle management to asset management for, large scale companies with multiple offices around the world. And then kind of shifted gears and just sort of had this passion and desire to want to own my own company. So about seven years ago, I broke away from a really good company that I was working for and decided to start my own company located here locally. Ran that company for a few years, found ourselves in a very difficult situation with finances. And had to shut that down. We can maybe get into that a little bit later in detail, but had to shut that company down and scale back and operated with myself and my younger brother on a much smaller level and scale. And decided again to shut that down because there was just kind of this burning desire, this passion. It wasn't feeding me, and I was just kind of antsy, and it was like kind of that almost that FOMO, appeal where something else is going on out there. And so for some reason found myself in South Texas 2 years ago and was doing oil and gas once again down there for BPX Energy. And when the pandemic hit, we made it through it. Everything was hunky-dory. We bought a house down there. We kind of intended to stay in Texas, somewhat, I would call it midterm, maybe 5 to 6, maybe 10 years at the most. And then we found the pandemic kind of, weighing heavy on ourselves and everybody else. And, we were just living in Texas. The hours had been cut, and the money obviously was cut because there wasn't the hours. And so you started to kind of look at what you loved and hated and expected out of your life. And it really wasn't fulfilling myself or my wife's needs down there. So we decided to move back home and ended up in Montana on a wind project, doing electrical for about 3 months, probably the most miserable time I've ever been in my life, in a hotel room without my family because we couldn't afford for them to come up. Maybe a 10 by 10 room in the middle of nowhere, super alone, and needed a massive change in my life. And so reached out to a mutual friend of ours. I won't say his name just because I haven't cleared it, on this situation. So we'll just keep it at that. But reached out to him and was like, what can I do, man? It's really just kind of looking for somebody to talk to on the other end of a phone. And he was like, just do real estate. And I was like, really? Like that simple? Just why not, man? You're miserable. And so it's like I got off the phone that night and I'm like Google searching, with the best training, this, that, and the other. And anyways, found the one that probably was the cheapest and just clicked yes and bought it. And, like texting my wife that night, like, I'm going to do real estate. And she's like, what? What do you mean? Hold on. Like, yeah, we've bought homes, you and I, but you're just going to be an agent? I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. I just made the change right now. And so, I don't know, we're a year into it. Actually, February 2nd will be my first year in the business. Work with a really good firm here in town. Is it okay to say their name on here?
Yeah, of course. Yep.
I worked for the Wells Group of Durango, and kind of found myself sort of stumbled into it, and had a really great mentor, a personal friend of mine, and she was excellent. A lot of the agents in that office have helped me with multiple issues that I've kind of experienced, and just found myself doing real estate, and I don't ever see it changing, whatever facet that is, whether it's from a transactional standpoint or an investment strategy. It's something that for some reason has really relit the fire, tenfold in me. And it's awesome to be a part of an industry that you wake up every day and I'm just like, yes, all right, what's new? Because literally it's going to be new. So that's awesome, anyhow.
All right. So we're gonna dive into like all kinds of stuff there. But first of all, let's kind of start back at the beginning, right? So
yeah,
you're an electrician and working for a company, right? And then you kind of mentioned you want to do your own thing. So, I've known you a long time. You do seem like this entrepreneur style, right? So tell us about the leap. Like, what was it like to leave a company? You acted like it was pretty good, kind of start your own thing. I mean, was it scary? Like kind of dive a little bit more into, if you're going to transition from working to somebody into your own thing, like what are some things that you learned? I mean, just kind of dive in if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. So just from a, I guess, to sort of give it the preface of how scary it can be or it is, or it was, that company was, I think at that time they were doing aggregately like 1.2 billion across the States, and they had like 3 or 4 offices and, overseas. And so, I managed an asset out of Aztec, New Mexico, and I think we grew it from, like within the first year, it was like an insane growth rate. Like we went from doing 300,000 to like 9 million in a year. And so we went from 3 employees to like 58. So the growth of that asset was massive. And it kind of sort of tailspin a lot of these opportunities. And then what happened, like that was kind of in the first little crash, 2013, 2015. And so we felt a lot of that locally because most of the production companies around here are producing natural gas. And so we obviously serviced those wells and, did the electrical side of it. And so what happened is like overnight, things kind of changed. The market swung, the volatility of the oil and gas market is massive, like most people know. And it swung, inevitably we're the contractors, right? We're the first to go. They're going to keep everybody that's employed. Everybody else, you're gone. Sorry, we can't spend the money. And so we had a lot of these guys were embedded in these companies, and they came knocking on the door that morning. They were like, hey, we hate to say this, but we're done. Your work stops today. Like call all of your crews out. And so at that time, I think I had like maybe 26 guys that were working for one of the major production companies. And, I had to lay them off immediately. I had no other work. I couldn't just keep them on payroll. It just didn't financially make sense. And the horrible thing, so this will be like the first time that this would have happened. I had to, of that group that I laid off was my brother-in-law and my younger brother. And so it was like, not only did that hit me personally, because I was safe, I still had a job, but it hit my immediate family. And so like going to Thanksgivings were going to be very, very awkward. And so, but prior to that, I don't know, you felt this like, it was like a very turbulent, very tumultuous time. And I just felt something had to change. Like something was coming down the pipe, and that cyclical, it was coming to an end in oil and gas. Like something was going to happen. We're going to have another bubble. It was going to hit rock bottom. And so I at the time was I started up my company prior to all this happening because I wanted to eventually, like, I was trying to tiptoe into the water and just see, what is it like out there? And so we were doing nothing but solar. And so at the time it wasn't a conflict of interest because the company I worked for didn't do any solar. And so I was doing that. And kind of as part of this firing process, I took like the cream of the crop, if you will. And I hate to say that. Anybody who was working for me at the time, if you hear this, I don't mean that negatively, but I had to take licensed individuals and other like higher, so I could bill them out at a higher, rate of hour. So I took those gentlemen, and we went to work doing some solar stuff. And they were still technically on the payroll for the company, but I was paying them out of my own pocket. And I don't even remember quite the way that it transpired, but somebody found out. They let my boss know, or like a general manager know. And it's like, I got a Monday morning phone call and I saw it come through, and like my gut just fell. And it's like, this is it, and it wasn't even, I didn't get fired on the phone. It's like, can I see you in the office? And I'm like, yeah, what for? He's like, I just need to see you. This guy would never in the office. Like, he managed from here to North Dakota. And so I just called my wife and I'm like, can you drive and meet me, please? They're going to fire me. She's like, they won't. I'm like, just drive. And so at that point, they forced my hand, and I had no other option but to jump in, because I had to literally provide for my family and these other gentlemen that were working for me at that time. I think it was maybe 3 or 4. And so I had to jump in both feet wet, or jump in both feet, and really just try to figure it out, because I really honestly, Eric, had no business running a business. Like I had been for my entire career, my entire adult life, using other people's money, right, wrong, or different. Whether I failed, lost $1 million, it never personally affected my own pocketbook. And so it was so scary, because I had made promises to myself, my wife. At that time, we had one small, young, my son was a year old. And so, I had to meet these commitments that I had made to these individuals that took a leap with me. And so it was like, hit the ground running. And we just, that was the first, I wouldn't say the first time that I jumped into doing business on myself. I would say that at that point in my life, I was far more risk averse than I am now, because I had no knowledge. I had no prior knowledge of what it's like to take this risk and how can you climb out of it if you fail. And so I would say to me, that is, my hand was pushed to make that decision. I can't sit here and just say, yeah, I'm such an entrepreneur and I wanted to do it. It was really scary. And I honestly don't know that if the way that all of those cards were laid out, if I ever would have, I wanted to, but I was scared to make that jump. So it's like, it's a blessing and a curse. At that time, I didn't make a check for another 9 months, but, thankfully I had some savings to kind of live on. And it made me have the entrepreneurial mindset that I have now, so. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of lessons with that too. Like, first of all, firing your brother-in-law, brutal, dude. I mean, no one should go through that. So good on you for getting through it. And I actually saw your brother the other day. He's doing great. So anyway, so dude, and then to be pushed into it. I think this actually happens more often than we care to admit. Like, people will want to start a business and then they'll lose their job, or sure, whatever. I mean, some other life event. So, I wouldn't say you're alone. So let's keep going, because you kind of rolled us through it. So what happened with that company, and then what happened following that?
Sure. Yeah. So the company, if we're just going to chronologically look at it, so that company, we operated for about 3 years, and we actually, so legitimately, and I'm not afraid to talk dollars with that one, because it's past me. So it's like, I literally had a $5,000 credit card in my pocket. And that's how we were, I don't think we were beg, stealing, or borrowing. We were robbing from Peter. And we had no intentions of paying fallbacks, right? So it was like, I had a $5,000 credit card, and every 2 weeks, payroll came around, and I'm knocking on vendors' doors. These guys were working for. I mean, I know from your company, you know some of these individuals. I'm over there we're nowhere near done. And I'm please, I need a paycheck. I need money now. And they're you're not even complete. I'm I promise I'll do it. And I'm out there on my word. And so anyways, we ramped this company up. And when we shut it down, we actually shut the doors with 23 people and 3 office admin. And so we went, we were operating at about, I would say maybe 1.6 to 1.8 a year. And for me, and my standpoint, that was great. I thought we did really good. We made a major misstep with that company. We had kind of set, coming from oil and gas, you're so used to policies and procedures, whatever they look like, whether that's from finances, we have check boxes, you need 3 signatures, you need 5. And so we had policies and procedures set in place. One of the major ones was on any bid for a job that was over $60,000. It had to have myself and my business partner's signature on it. Like we had to. And we did that as a forcing function. So that way we'd always meet and we'd look at it, and physically we would meet. That was a little bit pre-Zoom working as well as it does now. And so we would physically meet at the round table and we check this box, and we have this list, and okay, we look good. We might know we're being aggressive. We want to get this job. We'll get it back in on change orders or whatever. And we had this one job come across our table, and it was a great job. I was physically in southern New Mexico working with a very small project we had going on. Great client we like to work with. My partner was on another job. We basically made a phone call, and I was like, hey, you review the job. Let me know what it looks like. He had taken another bid from a completely different job that looked very similar on the surface. But once you got down to the nuts and bolts, it was a completely different job. And he's like, I think it's real similar to this. We look at him like, all right, you know what? Okay, let's go. Do it. And at that point, like immediately breached all of our policies and procedures. This bid ended up just under, I think we underbid that job by just under 300,000.
Ouch, brutal, dude.
Yeah, so, I mean, you look at that from a small, mom and pop shop with, at that point in time, we were 3 years in, we had operating capital. We had the means to kind of get through some of the things, but we didn't have the means to absorb a $300,000 loss. Now contractually speaking, we had far more than that on future gains or potential, but at that time. And so inevitably that caught up to us, bit us really hard. And, we, at that point, my partner and I kind of sorted to internally dissolve ourselves, wasn't on paper, but we were no longer working hand in hand with a lot of things. And it was kind of a lot of tit for tat and back and forth, and at that time you're so in it that you kind of want to point the blame and be like, what happened here? It was never me. Looking at it, hindsight, most of it was on me. I took my eye off the ball and kind of did some things, but met with the lawyers and they were like, you know what, man, you're financially insolvent. You got to shut the doors. And it was like, so it's like I started that company, I think when I was 28 or 29. By my 30th birthday, I had $1 million in our operating account. I checked that box, be a millionaire by your 30th birthday. And then I think at 31 or 32 to lose everything. I had to claim bankruptcy. At that point, I was like, I've lost everything, all of my career, everything is over. I've lost all my friends. No one's ever going to take me serious again. How could they ever believe in me to even give me a job? And so I kind of went through that whole process and found myself working with my younger brother, trying to figure out what are we doing? And it's like, it kind of takes the wind out of your sails when you go from running a company to being back on your tools, like spinning wire nuts, and so, that's that portion.
Man, that's, I mean, there's so much in there. And like I'm laughing because it's such a cool story, but I'm sure there was so much pain along the way. Right. I mean, you're describing like, being a millionaire by 30 is amazing and kudos to you. And then to like lose it all. I mean, it's also very cool that you admitted, you're kind of like, man, this is looking back. It's partially on you, right? You can't probably take all the blame, but to take some of that and then, like kind of moving forward. So before I dive too much deeper, let's keep going. So you and your brother kind of did your thing. And, I mean, if you remember, you helped me with a job and it was like the best electrician work I've ever seen. And I was like, these guys are incredible.
Is that a shed? Was it a shed?
Dude, it was, it's just, and also a rental property, but anyway,
sure.
So let's keep going, dude. So how did that roll? I mean, how did that kind of cruise? And then what'd you go from there?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually working with my little brother was really great. I never worked hand in hand with him. He had worked for me, obviously at the first company where I let him go. And then at Monarch, he also worked for me. But I never worked like physically on a crew with him. So there's like this like weird camaraderie that you just, if you get along in any kind of, I guess, caliber with your siblings, it can be so fun. It can be so aggravating as well. But if you can kind of work together, and it was like, it was from a construction standpoint, it was such a blessing to get that time. I just knew that for me, and this is unfortunate, and I do hope, honestly, Christian hears this at some point. I might not have said his name, but somebody could find it out. For him, I think that was that first phase of him trying to grow past where I had been many, many, many years ago. He wanted to see that kind of elevate to where some of my prior companies had been. And I just wasn't there. I was still, it was like coming off of a breakup. You know what I mean? It was the rebound company. And I hate to say that, but it was, two people, you can literally only bill, it's labor for hours, and you can only make so much. But I couldn't quite explain that to him. And I could see his passion. He's like, we're going to build this thing. And I was like, we're just not, it's just not going to get, at least in my heart, I wasn't ready to be there. So, I got the opportunity to go to Texas. And at that time, I kind of needed it to just step away from everything that I still felt like I had failed so many people, so many families, even myself. I felt like I was still a failure, that I needed to leave, kind of just run away for a second. And so when that opportunity came up to go to Texas, I talked to my brother and I was like, look, man, this is just not for me. And right now, he's way happier doing what he's doing. He's working for another firm in town. They're awesome. They're so up his alley that it's a perfect fit. And, for me, I went to Texas to really kind of just push pause on what I needed to come back and admit to myself. And so that's kind of where we severed the ties, and it was good. I mean, I think it was mutual. Like I said, I think he wanted to stay on longer, but it's just something that I had to do to get and gain personal growth, so found myself in Texas, and, that was good in a weird way. It was good and bad. I lost more time seeing my family than I will ever allow to happen. And as long as I can control it, we were working 16 to 18 hour days. So I was like gone, classic oil and gas story, like gone before they wake up, come home, maybe get a bite to eat, maybe the plate's in the oven. It was a very cliche kind of oil and gas type scenario. It was a good distraction for me to kind of forget everything that I had left here. And then when COVID hit and we got cut to 36 hours or 40, whatever it was, it allowed me to kind of see that stuff again and really start to process that in my mind and get through any kind of past feelings or emotions I had about it, whether it be depression, failure, resentment, and really look that in the face and be like, look, man, you cannot point the finger first. You're not a failure. You can bounce back from this. Like, look at what you did. Like, look at your accomplishments, but then also look at your failures, and then start to, compartmentalize those and pick out the goods and the bads and learn from, instead of just like dwelling on it and being, a Debbie Downer, for lack of better terms, just like it's a failure. Yes. Many people fail. You're going to fail at some point in your life. That was the biggest one I had ever experienced. So I couldn't just like bounce back. But once I had to focus on what I left, what I did, my accomplishments, how I could come back, it was like glaring us in the face. Like, it's time to move home. It's time to start over. How you're going to start over. At that time when we moved from Texas, I wasn't sure what we were going to do. I just knew that being in Texas wasn't where we wanted to be.
Man, so much good in there.
Not from a living standpoint. I'll invest there all day, but not from living.
I think anyone will invest there, man. It's awesome. Yeah. Well, a couple of things I want to dig in first, and then we'll kind of eventually land to where you are now. And the one thing that you just said was like, you're going to fail. Everyone's going to fail. I mean, some failures are bigger than others. Some failures are small, but the way that you especially the way you talk about it now, like, dude, you got to take the good with the bad. What can I learn from the good? Because you did a lot of amazing things. What can you do from the bad? What are the mistakes you made that you can learn from? And that's killer, because there's plenty of people out there who fail and they just never get back up, or they fail and then they take the super, super safe route for the rest of time. And then there's that burning urge like you have that just never gets fulfilled. So, you kind of described Montana that way. It was like, just never really fed you in any way. So let's kind of go there. So the next step sounded like you've landed up there, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that was a weird deal. Like I had to make money. So I was like, okay, we want to come home. I had a buddy, he's running projects for this company for years. And it was, it was paying really, really good money. And I was like, all right, I'll go up there. It can't be that bad. You tell yourself, I'll FaceTime an hour a night with the kids and it'll be great. It'll be, this is a short time. It's 3 months. That immediately gets turned on its ear when you're in the mix of it all. An hour of FaceTime starts to go to 15 minutes because your counterpart is making sure the kids are ready for bed. And all of a sudden you start to see your family less, and you're so physically far away from them that you just turns into your own misery, And then so I'm up there, it's bitter cold. It's at that time, I think it was like October-ish. And, I'm just miserable. I'm sitting in a 10 by 10, literally a 10 by 10 hotel room. It's a 2-story. I can never remember whether hotel is the worst one or a motel. It was
depends. I'll say I've seen both that are terrible.
So whichever one is the most terrible. I mean, they were really pleasant people too. The owners were great, but it just was the scenario. And it was really lonely. It was like at that point, it's like you go to work, you come home, you're sitting there, like, you don't realize like even that 5-hour span feels like an eternity when you're completely by yourself. And so, just trying to make sure that someone was on the end of the phone, I talked a lot to, a good friend of ours, and, just had that conversation. I was like, I have to, I'm miserable. What am I doing? And I didn't realize it, but I wasn't aware that he had left the firm that he was with here. And he used to be a real estate agent. So he left, and he was like, there might be an opening. Why don't you just become a realtor and just use that time up there for good, study, do whatever you need. And it was like light bulb, literally. And as I was saying earlier, I signed up that night for online courses. And I used every waking hour. I would work, we'd get back to the hotel at 6. I would make enough dinner, have a 15-minute Zoom call. And I was basically in the books from 7 to midnight. And so I got through all of the training in like 2 months, into that job, came back here, took my test, and then you find yourself in the search, and everybody always refers to where you're going to hang your hat. And so, I think going back to it for just a second though, and I apologize, but that misery right there drove me to something. It was like, I didn't have it figured out in Texas. I still didn't have it figured out in Montana. I just knew that I was so miserable. I was away from my family. I was missing months to years of my children's lives. Like, we moved to Texas when my son was 6.5. He turned 7 there, so, all right. So now he's 9, right? So how much of that time did you miss? I would see him on the weekends, and I lived with him. I lived in the same household, and I would see them physically and my wife on the weekends. Now I'm in Montana, and I'm not seeing them other than any form of digital. And so it's like, I started to think about that and add up the time. It's like, you've literally lost years off your children's life that you're never getting back. And so it was like, light bulb, do this. I don't care what you make. If you make 30 grand a year and that's it, figure out life on 30 grand a year and go home. And that was my driving force. Like, it's no longer about the money. You will figure out how to live on less money, do a job that makes damn sure that you're going to see your kids every single day, and that you're going to try to be at all the events. Maybe not all of them, almost all of them.
You can't make it every single one. No, I'm just kidding. But that was maybe the best minute of this podcast ever. What you just said. Yeah. Kyle Wolff.
I'm rambling.
Podcaster. No, dude, it's not rambling. Seriously, rewind it what he said, because I think a lot of people think money brings happiness, and they will chase it and chase it and chase it. And I personally, everyone has a different view. I've never said money's the goal. I will admit most people want more of it, but it's a tool, right? And way, way, way more important are the things that you had to learn the hard way. So I hope that everyone who listens to this hears that your family is 10 million times more valuable than money. And so, what you just said was like, dude, figure it out. If you make 30 grand a year, 20 grand a year, 10 grand, it doesn't matter. There's plenty of people who make $1,000 a year around the globe, right? And they're plenty happy because they're with their family, loved ones. So that's honestly one of the greatest things I've heard on this podcast ever. And I hope that we can highlight it so strong right now. So that's killer, man. So now let's fast forward a little bit, because the story does get a little bit more cheery from here.
All sunshine and rainbows at this point. So
yeah, well, honestly, I've known you more and closer lately, but kind of fast forward now. So you jumped in real estate. Yeah. The Wells Group in Durango is the premier place to work for real estate. There's a handful of others, but really, really good place to be, in my opinion, from what I know of it. So describe what that final transition was like to where you are now. Was it hard to get rolling? To me, it's always like a tough business to enter.
Yeah, it was. And honestly, I, kind of going back to that risk adverse situation, like I would say I'm not risk adverse at all. I'm very tolerant, but I'm also not naive to it. So I try and do a lot of research, but, coming back just for a second. So I thought when I was training in Montana, right, or studying or whatever we want to call it, I thought I had a guaranteed job at the vacancy that was just created by our friend going to another state. And so I kind of made some, communications with some of those individuals. And I thought I was going to come home and again, tiptoe into an industry that I didn't really understand or had no knowledge really being into, right? Completely different facet. And now I'm doing something different. And so when I got back here, passed my test and I go into this meeting at this smaller firm in town. And they're like, hey man, everything is good, but right now we can't take on anybody. Like we're full up. Like sorry. And I was like, wish you well. And I was like, oh God. Like hold on, that was my line. Hold on, I studied, I cramped. What do you mean? I thought I had a job, And so I go out and I call a really dear friend of mine, and she's a great agent in town. She's one of the top in our industry locally, and she is phenomenal. And I'm like, can I say her name if that's okay?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, give her a shout out.
I don't know. So her name is Lauren Ammerman. She's a great friend. She's a solid agent. And I call her, I'm like, Lauren, what am I going to do? And I tell her the story and she's like, I don't know if the Wells Group's willing to. They haven't hired any new agents in 3.5 years, but I can put a call in for you. And if they go for it, I'll be your mentor. And I'm like, are you serious? She didn't have to do that. She's terribly busy. She didn't have time for me. And so she makes a call. Jim Watkins, who was formerly, co-owner of the Wells Group, calls me and is like, interview tomorrow. I'm like, oh man, this is serious. All right. So, but I was scared because it's, such a small fish in a big pond. Not only within our office walls, there's 43 agents, but there's 400 agents in our tiny little bubble of real estate. Right. And so I was really scared. I thought I'd have a better opportunity at a smaller firm to kind of, again, tiptoe into the environment. But by going into the Wells Group, I had to jump in. It's just like owning my own business, right? But this time they've got policies and procedures and I'm not breaking any of those and I've learned from my mistakes. And so I jump into the Wells Group, they give me a position. And it was super slow. Going back to your question, super slow. That 3-month initial kind of getting in, building your book, just trying to grow yourself as a brand new agent. No one wants to give you the time of day. No one, right? You're trying to work every floor shift you possibly can to maybe just get a call and just get super, super lucky. Everybody talks about Sphere, whether you manage it with a CRM or however, it doesn't matter. We're so it's in such a small community that I call some of my Sphere that was like, I'm at barbecues every weekend with these folks and I know them on such a personal level. They're like, Kyle, we love you, man. We appreciate you. But, we've used such and such forever. We can't do that to them. They've done all this legwork. And I'm like, so it's like every time just chipping away. And it's like, I keep getting knocked back down. And so, I'm just trying to think back to my very first deal. I'm only barely into this. And I almost barely remember it, but, you know what it was? Honestly, we got it's one of the other agents at the office, great agent, work with him on a lot of different projects. Really, really great person. He had a small piece of land. It was nothing, total junk land. Nobody wanted it. Been sitting on the market for 4 years. And so he's like, I don't want to relist this. I don't have time to drive out there. Would you like it? And I'm reeling for everything, just throwing darts and seeing what sticks. And so I get this land, I put it on the market. I list it, sells the first day. Thankfully we're in the market, I guess, that we are, right? Because it never would have sold. But anyways, that kind of gave me the steam. And I felt so good about that because I was starting to feel like I was failing again. Man, you made this huge leap. You want this, but maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe you're not. And so here's where the tipping point of me knowing that I will never, if I can help it, Eric, leave the real estate industry, whether that's from sales transactions or from investment. And I found myself right before I got that first sale done, right? And mind you, that was no money. That was such a small piece of land. It was $600, but it was the best.
It doesn't matter, man. You hit the closing table. It's super cool.
amazing. And they're like, even the Welsh was like, it's a small check, but they'll get better. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Like I did it. So at that point in time, I was starting to feel like I was failing again. Right. And so inevitably, like all these like negative thoughts were creeping back up. And so I reached out at a barbecue. These folks are talking. They work for this company, which used to be Mercury Payment System, which is now FIS Global. And so they're like, hey man, maybe you could get a job over here, working on the back end of credit card processing. And, you could probably still do the real estate. And I'm not making any money. There's nothing coming in. Everything is going out. Right. And I'm like looking at that bank account kind of dwindling. You're like, oh, I need to do something. I could, I don't want to do electrical. And so I get this job and it's like 3 months down the road. I had applied for it, get it, go through the hiring process, all the thing. So I get this job and I literally start my first day. And it's like, I go into my Zoom meeting and I'm like, okay, this is going to happen. And then the day ends and it's like nothing. It's so boring. You're sitting there doing your deal. All these people are awesome. They're great. They're so nice to me. They're probably the kindest people I've ever worked for. Like whatever you need. And so I ended up, end of the day, and it's like the deal closes. Boom, files closed, transactions done. And I get on the phone with our mutual friend, right? Who's living in another state. And I'm like, I just need you to just not be an echo chamber, but I just need to spout off for like 5 minutes. And I just go off for probably 10. And I'm like, I hate this job. It's making me feel like if I don't really go after this real estate thing that I'm going to miss out on the biggest opportunity in my life. And I'm going. He's dead quiet. And he's like, I told you 6 months ago, man, or 8 months ago, whatever, like, just go be a realtor. Like, what are you doing? Why? And then it was like, at that moment, it's like, okay, you know what? It's that simple. And that seems so ridiculously small, but it was that simple. It was like, you got in this to be a realtor. Be a realtor. It's not going to be easy. Nobody said it's going to be an easy game or you're going to make millions. You got to hustle. And, I got off the phone. The next day I log in and I call him. I call the boss at this payment processing company. I'm like, this is not a good fit for me. It's nothing against you guys. I just want to cut this right now and I'm going to move on. I'm going to go back to doing what I want to do. And she's like, okay, thanks for doing it so early. I appreciate that. And that next week, I'm like hustling and it's like 1 deal, 2 deal, 3 deal, boom. And it's like out of nowhere. It was just like, it's like the stars aligned. And it sounds so ridiculous, but it was like, I'm fearful that had I done that other thing that was kind of pulling me away from doing what I wanted to do, not what I had to do, but what I wanted to do, that I would have missed out on those deals. I know it, especially trying to work, work the file and dealing with that without a transaction coordinator at that time and doing this and this and this. Like I would have missed a step. I could have potentially lost money for somebody. I could have, and so anyways, I cut ties with that, completely ran with the real estate agency thing. And maybe it's a lot of luck. I don't know. Maybe it's drive, maybe it's skill. I'm just doing this and I'm 12 transactions under for the year. And I've got 6 on board set to close January and February. So
awesome, man.
I don't know. I don't know how else to I can't really, put a checkbox by like this happened or that happened. It was like dire straits. It was like a ridiculous phone call, with like, just go be a realtor. Like that's simple. Like, just go do what you signed up to do. And it was like, you know what? Lights off again. Let's go.
Oh man, that's killer.
It's been the best decision I've ever made in my whole life.
Yeah. I mean, we've avoided his name, but he's a very good friend of ours. Great dude. And like, so cool that he was available for you to talk and talk it out, but again, like I love this story so much and I'm so hopeful that like people can hear it and resonate. Cause like lots of times, I mean, you've kind of hit this thing like 3 or 4 times where you could have given up. You could have like made other money somewhere else, done something else, but sticking to your passion is so, so cool. And I'm so happy for you that you're like, I mean, you're crushing it now. I mean, that's an awesome year for year 1, right? So congrats. I don't know if crushing it, but
you know what? I will say that it doesn't feel like it's about the money. And I think I had to kind of, you hear that like constant, like I had to go there to come back here. And it took me a long time. I chased money. My goal was to be a millionaire by 30. I don't want to like, if anybody listening to your podcast is like, if they have that as their goal, the entire goal is about money. It's not about the path. It's not about the process. It's not about what you learn along the way or the friends you meet. Your entire goal, if you set that and you're trying to hit that checkbox, is about money, and so that was mine. And so maybe it's coming from nothing growing up and not having affluent parents or a lifestyle that kind of, drove me towards that. But when I really realized that my goal or goals in life are not money based, that's when I think honestly doors really started opening up. And I can truly see that with people. And I'm not sure if it's just, how things kind of align and maybe people hear that or see that, or that's just how you kind of walk into a room and you exude that presence. Like, I'm not here for the money, but I will tell you what, getting a deal done, whoo, that is such a rush. But for me, it's no longer about the money. Like, it's great to do $1 million deal, but you don't make $1 million. So for me, it's being the best I can be, representing the buyer, seller, or whomever, and just making sure that the deal gets done at all costs. And so I'm just so happy that everything kind of moved itself into that fashion. And I can clearly say that with absolute conviction. It's not about the money, not anymore.
Oh man, that's so cool. And, just for the listeners, I mean, let's talk about your age, because you're still super young.
Sure.
Right. So what are you, 34 now?
I'm 36.
Oh man, you're super old. I'm 36 too. I'm actually about to be 37. The point of that is, dude, you got a long way to go. And for you to say at the age of 36, it's not about the money. It takes people till, like, most people 65 to say those, sure. Like, you hear those people say, like, I wish I would have looked back, but you went through some super hard times, right? I don't wish that stuff upon anyone, but to be where you are now and to truly mean it and say it that way. So let's look at the future. So where are you headed from here? I mean, you said you want to stick in real estate. I mean, do you want to continue some transactions, mostly investments? I mean, what's kind of your future goals, if you have the ability to talk about it?
Sure. No, I definitely, like I said, like I'm like a line, like this block to this block, right? How do you go from here to here? And then if I don't focus my mindset like that, whether, I don't know, some people, morning affirmations, whatever the deal is, in my mind, I always like equate it to, like, if you wanted to buy a 2014 Toyota Tundra that was white and lifted, you found it online, but you didn't buy that day. And all of a sudden you start seeing it everywhere, right? So it's like, it's because they're already out there. It's just out of sight, out of mind. And so those are kind of distractions. So, I hit you up the other day. I hope it's okay to say that, but
yeah,
I'm like listening to podcasts, like Bigger Pockets, and there's so much data and information out there. It's like, I was feeling like I was getting inundated with all of the data, all the potential books to read, all the podcasts to listen to. And so I just reached out and I'm like, Eric, all right, one book to give me, that I need to listen to. I want to build the fundamental knowledge of multifamily investing. Like, how do I do it? And I know you sent me two. I didn't care about the second one. I'm not going to start it until I finish the first one.
There you go, man.
I actually downloaded the audiobook and I've started listening to that. So Simone and I are hopefully closing on our last single family investment property on the 7th of January. So
congrats, man.
I've collectively made a promise to each other to not invest single family unless it's for personal use. And that is just because, everything that I'm hearing on podcasts, reading, it's economies of scale. And we've tried. We've never lost on an investment, but there's never like you buy it like, oh, we're going to rent it and we're going to make so much money, or we're going to sell it in 5 years or 10 years, and you just never do that. Like, single family doesn't, at least for us. Maybe there's a person that stumbles into like the best, I bought it for $40,000. Now it's worth $900,000, but for us, we always kind of either rented it, making tiny insignificant margins over our mortgage. But at the time of sale, we've always recouped something. And so this is our last investment that we're getting out of in Texas, as far as single family is concerned. And then we will be focusing our investments into multifamily. So, and I go back to it. I'm like, that guy is like box to box, right? Like, here's the plan. Here's the goal. Don't get clouded by the distractions. I want to make sure that I understand the fundamental knowledge of it. I just say this because, you talk on other podcasts, everybody talks, passive investing versus, being a GC or whatever the case scenario is. It's like, I'm not opposed to maybe passive investing, but I'm not saying that I'm all on board with it. I'm still learning. And so even if I was like, hey, Eric, here's $100,000. I want to be a passive investor on something. I still want to make sure I do all the research, right? Going back to that, I'm not adverse at all. I'm very tolerant, but I want to make sure that I'm doing my research. And so that's kind of where I want to go as far as my investments. As far as real estate, I have, I have goals, and they're really big. And I didn't meet my goal this year. It was way too big. Everybody was like, there's no way. But I will say this, under contract, I met my goal. Unfortunately, well, it's fortunate, right? But I have some really good stuff that is an elongated close. And so under contract, I did meet my goals, but I didn't physically get the checkbox of closing that transaction in my first year. So I'm going to work harder next year. And part of that is being a little bit different in my marketing strategies, in multiple ways. And so I still want to, I just enjoy being a real estate agent. I really do. It's highly competitive. Our local market, I think most markets are heavily, even overly saturated. You really, it's so hard to stand out if you're not in the top 50, and I'm so far from the top 50 that it's not even funny, but I'm doing okay. And I love it, and I'm passionate about it. And so I'm going to continue on and continue doing that as my quote unquote day job. Yes, I do want to invest, and I believe in, because of the economy of scale, and investing in multifamily. I don't know how that looks yet, though. I don't know if that's like, I hear so many bad stories about like, don't do a quad or a sixplex. And I'm like, wait a minute, that seems good on the surface, but it's, listening to too many podcasts has got me scared away from it.
No, they're good, man. So, okay, a couple of things. We'll start back a little bit. First of all, there is a niche for a single family, but I tend to agree. Like, it takes the right person, right deal, right systems to make money in single family, or good money, right? I think a lot of people do like the buy one rental per year of like a 10-year period type thing. That's there again, there's the time and place for that type of deal. But yeah, we can talk offline. I think there's also a really, really good place for quads. Like, one of the smartest people in the multifamily space, his name's Neil Bawa. He builds quads for that reason, and then sells them and rents them and stuff, because there's a really cool niche in the quad world. So again, we can talk offline, but then scaling, dude, I think what I want to highlight too is like your passion for education. Like, lots of people will invest. I think if you know the person, if you really know that they're a killer operator, you probably want to research a little, understand, maybe jam a podcast or two. But in reality, the more you can learn, the better to invest. And so I think you're doing it right. I always preach this, is like, learn what you're doing, because if you're putting some money with somebody, try and understand as best you can what's happening. It's always about the operator, but ultimately it'd be cool to know about the business. And then, knowing your personality and style, it's probably not shocking to say this, but I could see you as a operator in the future. Just got that killer drive. So this is one of the best podcasts I've ever recorded, because you just have such a cool story. So I actually didn't reach my goals either. I set some goals, and I think there's some, I think I read some research was like, the best goals, you get to like 90%. And then you set another one, right? So when you say big, dude, I hope it's killer.
Yeah. It's like, I always go back to, I know it's ridiculous. And at this point, it's probably got 1,000 memes, but it's like Matthew McConaughey's like, my goal is always to be myself in 10 years. And then when I get there, he's like always inevitably like pushing it further than he can ever reach. And I do agree with that model, but it's probably better that I didn't hit this year's, because I might've got an ego about myself or something. But, the good thing is like, I didn't change that goal, I didn't change it regardless of what happened in the beginning. And, it was like 6 months before I closed my first deal. You got 3, you're kind of learning. And when I was like, and I look at it all the time, it's right up on the computer screens. This is your goal. This is your target. And I really thought, this is crazy enough that if you get into this and it's not going to work, you're going to bump that goal back. But I left it, and I didn't hit it, and I'm okay with it, because I think it's going to keep me driven, and honestly, like, it's kind of funny. Like, John Wells is the owner of the Wells Group in Durango, and we had a kind of a business, I guess, end of year kind of business review, projections for next year. What are you looking like? What do you need from us? It's great. It's always nice to kind of go through that and hear that out loud. And, I looked at him, I was like, here's my goal for this year, this year, this year. And he's like, that's awesome that you're looking like 3 to 5. That's great. And he's like, that's a big goal. And I'm like, yeah, like that's, yeah. Yeah. Oh, I know that sounds crazy, right? But like, I think on one hand of it, I'm probably a little bit crazy, and that's okay. I'm good with that. But it's going to keep me moving. It won't allow me to ever be stagnant or stale or just be, I won't get to that point to where I'm not driven to do something better. And if I do, then I'll about face and do something that interests me,
Oh man, that's so good. So first of all, I think I love that about real estate. It's like you kind of like hustle, right? And the more you hustle, the more you do a good job. I think that's super important too, of course, the more you're going to succeed. And then beyond that, I love the last thing you just said. Because my wife and I have this like semi-motto mantra thing is like, if we're not happy, make a change. Doesn't matter what that means. Doesn't matter how big it is. Doesn't matter what the financial risk is. Make a change and look yourself in the mirror, sit down, think about it for several weeks and be like, all right, let's do it. And you've done that a handful of times. And I think what you just said is super, super good stuff.
Most people, honestly, they go back to like, they've got monthly bills, right? Whether you inherit them, accrue them, whatever the case is, I would say most people that I talk to, because I do try and, like, I don't have a platform where I teach, but I do try and talk openly to somebody who's scared of making a change, right? Most of the time, what I hear is it's because or stemming from the bills that they have, like the things that they own, end up owning them, right? And so, like, you would be surprised if you restructure your living scenario, how much little money you need to survive. And not just like, oh, we're eating, white bread with potatoes tonight. Sorry, kids. Like, you can have a good life and make less money. And it took me not making any money from the real estate game to kind of realize like that, like, you still have bills. We still have to do things to survive. But like, if you really take a hard look under a microscope at what you're doing with your bills and your life and the way you're paying for things, you'd be surprised how much things you can cut out and either retain that or reinvest that, and live off of less. Like, those things are nice, right? Like, I used to have a really awesome truck. I no longer have it. Part of me misses it at times, but the other thing is I still have a truck and it gets me from here to there. It does the same exact job. No client that's ever hopped in my truck is like, ooh, this thing is used. You know what I mean? And so, like, yeah, it's silly, but it's like really look at it. If anybody on your podcast is listening to this and they're thinking about making that step, I would like really assess your living situation, because you can make it.
What's cool about what you just said too, is it actually applies for everybody. I don't care if you make 10 grand a year. I don't care if you make $500,000 a year. I was talking with someone yesterday. He said he works with a room full of 40 people in a room. They all make over 200K. And he was kind of walking around, he was talking about real estate, and not like trying to pry or anything, but asking about investing. And he said the majority of the room said they don't have cash to invest because it's kind of the American way, dude. You like spend what you make. And so what you said was like, it applies across the board. You can actually live slightly less, and use that money to invest. And so a lot of people like call it lifestyle creep, like make a little more, spend a little more, make a little more, spend a little more, nicer things. But if you actually can sacrifice a little bit and invest that stuff, like the extra, you'll be grateful down the road. All right, Kyle, final question, man. How can people reach out? How can people find you?
Yeah. Oddly enough, I just got social media off my phone because it was a bit of a distraction for me, but I do get on the PC every week. And you can reach me at Kyle Wolff Realtor on Instagram, Facebook, Instagram. Shoot a message. Glad to interact. And I appreciate you having me on, Eric. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Kyle, thanks for being here. Killer show, man. Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Real Estate Mindset Podcast. If you've enjoyed the content today, please follow this show wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to head over to wildoakcapital.com for more information or to connect with Eric directly. Please take a moment to leave a review or tell a friend about what you've listened to today. We hope you'll tune in again soon.